Do you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
Well, I'm sorry for that. For your sake. I don't play accurately. No, anyone can play accurately. But I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord Shoreham and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it at a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink the champagne? Now, I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens. Is marriage as demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself. I've only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? No, they seem as a class to have absolutely no sense of their moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Now, where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amused?
Oh, neighbours.
You've got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire.
Oh, perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Oh, Shropshire. Yes, of course. Hello, why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
Oh, how perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
Well, may I ask why?
Oh, my dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
No, I don't see anything romantic in proposing. No, it is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
And I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there is no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you've been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She's my aunt. How's the bread and butter? The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Now, Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Very good bread and butter it is, too.
My dear fellow, you need not eat it as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
But it is nonsense.
No, it isn't. It's a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily.
Bring me the cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes.
Do you mean to say that you have had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you'd let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. That's very nearly offering a large reward.
Oh, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There's no good in offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter. For now that I look at the inscription, I find the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what's written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
It is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
But I'm quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes. A charming old lady she is, too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Now, just give it back to me, Algy.
Why does she call herself Little Cecily? If she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells, from Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall and some aunts are not tall. That is a matter that surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That's absurd. Now, for heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. Now, there is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it is Earnest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
But you always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You're the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It's perfectly absurd. You're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here is one of them, Mr. Ernest Worthing. B4, the Albany... No, I'll keep this as a proof. Your name is Ernest. If ever you attempt to deny it to me or to Gwendolyn or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy! You'd much better have the thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It's very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now, go on! Tell me the whole thing! I may mention, I have always suspected you as being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
A Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you were kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray, make it improbable.
No. My dear fellow, there's nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect, which you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country, under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is this place in the country, by the way?
But that is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, I don't know that you'll be able to understand my real motives. You're hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone is hardly conducive to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest, who lives at the Albany and gets in the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
Oh, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. The modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that to the people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. No, what you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest, in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I've been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know, you were absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You'd much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dined there on Monday. And once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relatives. In the second place, I am always treated as a member of the family and sent into dinner with either no woman at all or 2. In the third place, I know perfectly well she'll place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. She's always asking me to forgive him, and that sort of thing is rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Earnest, and I strongly advise you to do the same with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury, and if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
Oh, that is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she is the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. No, you don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time. That is the worst of the English. They are always degrading truths into facts. And when truths become facts, they lose all their intellectual value.
Do you always really understand what you say?
Yes. If I listen very carefully.
Then you have far more brains than I have ever given you credit for.
No, my dear fellow, until you believe I have got absolute genius, There will always be a slight coldness between us. There must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you can have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. So shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together. Good afternoon, Mr. Worthing.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Huh? I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for developments. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon. But I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. Now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens. Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its colour. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down to dinner with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say, a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I've just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes. Poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice. As far as any improvement in his ailments goes, I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday. For I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. And I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. If one plays good music, people don't listen. If one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn up if you'll kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the programme will be delightful. After a few expurgations, French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think that they are improper, and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe is so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
A charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpit, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen?
Passionately.
Oh, darling! You don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But you don't, of course, mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Earnest.
Yes. Yes, I know it is. But supposing it was something else, do you really mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, and to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think that name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolen, I must say, I think there's lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? No! There is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John. And I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you're not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing at all has been said about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolen!
Yes, Mr. Worthing? What have you got to say? say to me?
Well, do you know what I've got to say to you?
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn. Will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I am afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
Well, my own one, I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma! I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise. Pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolen. Gwendolen! The carriage!
Yes, Mamma.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. Although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I'm quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a rarely affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
Well, I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it, about 1,500 acres, I believe. Of course, I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who can make anything out of it.
A country house, how many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham, Of course, I can get it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us. Or come in the evening, at any rate. Now, to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
Both? To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce? Or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
Yes, the late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me, and he gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where does a charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket for this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag, a somewhat large, black, leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom? At Victoria Station?
Yes. The Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to.
Well, may I ask you then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible. And to make a definite effort to produce at least one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom. Form an alliance with a parcel. Good day, Mr. Worthing.
Oh, for For goodness sake, don't play that ghastly tune, Algy! How idiotic you are!
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? If she did, you just have to propose again. That is all. If she refuses you a second time, she's sure to marry you.
Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your aunt that way.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die.
Oh, that is nonsense!
It isn't!
But I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
Oh, that is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does, that's his.
Is that clever?
Oh, it's perfectly phrased and quite as true as anything in modern life should
Well,
be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
What fool?
By the way, have you told Gwendolyn the truth about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she's plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
Now, what about your brother? What about the profligate, Ernest?
Oh, before the end of the week, I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You'd much better say a severe chill.
You're sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well, then. My poor brother Ernest is carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Well, that's all right. Cecily's not a silly, romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She's got a capital appetite, goes long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care you never do. She is excessively pretty, and she's only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who's only just 18?
One doesn't blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, my dear boy, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7?
It's always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
Now, what shall we do after dinner? Go to a theatre?
No, I loathe listening.
Well, let us go to a club.
No, I hate talking.
We might trot around the Empire at 10.
No, I can't bear looking at things. It's so silly.
What shall we do?
Nothing!
It's awfully hard work, doing nothing. Although, I don't mind hard work when there's no definite object of any kind. Gwendolyn, upon my word!
Miss Fairfax!
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Ware.
Really, Gwendolyn? I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do that. Pray oblige me by turning your back. Ernest!
My own darling!
We may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibres of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
Oh, the Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
The Manor House?
Woolton.
Woolton, Hertfordshire. There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn round now.
Thanks. I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
Oh, you will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There's a ripping girl. Sensible, intellectual. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape one day.
I love scrapes! They're the only things that are never serious.
That is nonsense, Algernon. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does. Besides, I love nonsense. The Manor House. Woolton, Hertfordshire.
What a great first act. Now I invite you to stretch your legs or go Bunburying for a brief intermission before Act 2 of Roundabout Theatre Company's The Importance of Being Earnest.
On a recent London-like day in Southern California, three-time Tony nominee Alfred Molina and noted Wilde scholar and director Michael Hackett met on the campus of the University of California, Los Angeles to discuss the importance of being earnest and all things Oscar Wilde.
I think one of the great satisfactions of working on Oscar Wilde is this sense of absolute clarity and straightforwardness. You know, there's something about his writing that means that you can't dress it up. It's so beautifully, finely wrought. Every phrase has a poise, a sense of balance. You know, the whole notion of the bon mot. You know, most people will recognize, you know, I can resist everything except temptation itself.
I think I've read that Wilde actually practiced before he would go to dinner parties his bon mot.
Oh yes. Well, but the thing is, he came from a society where wit, the ability to be witty, to talk in a vivacious, bright, intelligent, sophisticated, funny way, was a great social skill. I mean, it was almost as important, if not more important, than a formal education. It was a social skill that meant that you'd be invited again. But I remember we had a conversation many moons ago about the importance of being earnest that struck me as really interesting, which was this notion of subversion, of subversiveness, that, you know, that there were characters in the play that represented pillars of Victorian society.
Well, Lady Bracknell, of course, represents society, and especially aristocratic society, and Miss Prism represents education.
Right.
Reverend Trasable represents the church. And in the original four-act version, there's also a lawyer or a solicitor. So he represents the legal system.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, definitely. Wilde is, with his extraordinary humor, undoing these, what you call pillars of the social system. and he sort of decimates them, that then leaves the young people on the stage with Gwendolyn and Cecily and Algie and with Jack. Once those social pillars are toppled, they sort of reinvent who they are and what their relationships could be.
So when The Importance of Being Earnest was staged, how crucial was it that by that point already Wilde was a huge sort of theatre star?
I think that's part of what it's about, is the giddiness of the celebrity. So the giddiness of the play partly has to do with the extraordinary fame that Wilde has by this time. And something unprecedented happened. This was in 1895 when this play was premiered. The Prince of Wales came to the opening night. This is not something that royalty did. So for him to come was the ultimate bestowal of power on Wilde. In a way, it was though he were being metaphorically knighted in front of all of London. So then his fall from grace is especially tragic.
Was the play an instant hit?
Immediate hit. And the order of the great Salon plays are Lady Windermere's Fan, A Woman of No Importance, then The Ideal Husband, and finally Earnest. And each one of these went from success to success to success, greater and greater and greater success. So Fred, you were telling me about how you felt when you heard that Brian Bedford was going to play Lady Bracknell.
Well, my first reaction when I heard that Brian was playing, and here he is, and I think my reaction was, of course, why not? Absolutely perfect casting. Just a personal story, I saw Brian play Malvolio in a production of Twelfth Night, and it was a piece of comic genius, in my opinion, and I actually wrote him a fan letter, which I very rarely do, but I wrote him a fan letter, and I just told him up front that if ever I get to play Malvolio, I'm going to steal all his shtick, because it was just perfect. And he has this wonderful capacity for humour, for comedy, and I think it's just great that these plays, you know, that we're still doing these plays. It's wonderful.
I agree, it's exciting.
They're about to start.
Great.
Now, we only have a couple of minutes before the start of Act Two, but you will recall that when we left Brian Bedford's dressing room before the performance began, he was about to begin the steps that would transform him from man about town to scary old lady. Well, Brian was kind enough to let one of our cameras stay behind, and we've captured the entire transformation process, from face to hair to clothes. A lot of techniques are used to turn Brian into the memorable Lady Bracknell. Let's take a look. Wow, there really is nothing like a dame. Intermission's over. Everyone here at the American Airlines Theater on 42nd Street in Times Square has found their way back to their seats. Hope you have too, because now it's time for Act Two, the Roundabout Theater Company's production of The Importance of Being Earnest.
Occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanour is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know German and geology, and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I'm not in favour of the modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it sometimes chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that the circulating library sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are! I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
No, the good ended happily, the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so. But it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. But to your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning, Miss Prism? You are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
Well, that is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I should hang upon her lips. Oh. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet.
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes, he usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely drawn from the pagan authors. I will see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
Oh, that would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He's brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 the Albany, London. Uncle Jack's brother! Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you, privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you had better speak to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I am so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does!
You are my little cousin Cecily, I am sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I'm not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, of course, I have been rather reckless.
I am glad to hear it.
In fact, now you mention the subject, I have been very bad, in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
Oh, it is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you are here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. Oh, but still, I think you had better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
About your emigrating. He has gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, the accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind, cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. Oh, I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
Oh, that is because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Oh, thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
Marie Charmier!
Oh, no, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you would like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Oh, then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
Oh, they are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Oh, believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously why the primitive church has not lasted to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often I've been told not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green! I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Oh, perhaps she followed us to the school.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead?
Your brother Ernest dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
For charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us is perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. Yes. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. Joyful, or as in the present case, distressing. I preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, days of humiliation, and festal days. Well, the last time I delivered it was in the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontentment among the Upper Classes. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
Oh, that reminds me. You mentioned christening, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen, all right? I mean, of course, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the lower classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what restraint is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor, no. I'm very fond of children. But the fact is, I would like to be christened myself. This afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you've been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I have the very gravest doubts. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Oh, not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehension. Sprinkling is all that is necessary. Or indeed, I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable.
Yeah.
At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me to be a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I am pleased to see you back! But what horrid clothes you have on! Do go and change them!
Cecily!
My child, my child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do you look happy? You look as if you had toothache, and I have such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother, Earnest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out. And you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
My brother is in the dining room? Well, I don't know what it all means. I think it's perfectly absurd. Oh, good heavens!
Brother John, I've come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I've given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack! You are not going to refuse your own brother's hand!
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think he's coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice! There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. Surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he has told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury? Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side, but I must say, I think Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I had expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering this is the first time I've come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
What, never forgive me?
Never, never, never!
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation. I think we might leave the 2 brothers together.
Certainly. Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You've done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
Young scoundrel! You must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any Bunburying here.
I've put Mr. Earnest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that's all right?
What?
Mr. Earnest's luggage, sir. I've unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack! I haven't been called back to town at all!
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call
Your
me.
duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
Oh, I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look quite ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? Oh, it's perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who was actually staying for a whole week with you as a guest in your house. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You've got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave you as long as you were in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I was in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress, and with such little result.
Well, at any rate, that is better than being always overdressed, as you
If
are.
I'm occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you've got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you'll have a pleasant journey back to town. This bun-burying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it's been a great success. I am in love with Cecily, and that is everything. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
Oh, he's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
And have we got to part?
Oh, I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Mannerman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
No! You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you'll order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Oh, Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell her to come round next week. At the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew that you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes. It will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Oh, darling, and when was our engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of April last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name. And this is the little bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you have wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters! But my own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
No, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote to me after I had broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last May. You can see the entry if you like. Oh, today, I broke off my engagement with Earnest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather continues charming.
But why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I'd done nothing at all. So, Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear you broke off our engagement, particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Oh, yes, darling. With a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily.
I don't think I could now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes! Of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Earnest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
My own dear child, do you mean to say you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
What name?
Any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my own dear, sweet, loving little darling, I really don't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. In fact, it is rather an aristocratic name. Half the chaps who get into the bankruptcy courts are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algy, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear that I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the practice of all the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh, yes. Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once, on a most important christening. I mean, a most important business. Oh. I shan't be away for more than half an hour.
Considering that we have been engaged since April the 14th, and that I only met you today for the first time, I think it is rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is! I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal in my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Is it Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss?
Miss Fairfax. I I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack and some of his philanthropic work in London.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew. Cecily Cardew? What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong. How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down. I may call you Cecily, may I not? With pleasure. And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you? If you wish. Then that is all quite settled, is it not? I hope so. Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose? I don't think so. Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So do you mind my looking at you through my glasses? Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. I am very fond of being looked at. You are here on a short visit, I suppose? Oh, no, I live here. Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also? Oh, no, I have no mother, nor, in fact, any relations. Indeed? My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me. Your guardian? Yes. I am Mr. Worthing's ward. Ah. 'Tis strange. He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly... Pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid. Well, to speak with perfect candour, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42, and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour. I beg your pardon, Gwendolen, but did you say Ernest? Yes. Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother. Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother. I am sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time. Ah, that accounts for it. And now I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian. Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his. I beg your pardon. Dearest Gwendolen, there is no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married. My darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest. I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago. It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I am afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you! This is no time for wearing a shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Yes. As usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town?
Quite a well-kept garden, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country. If anybody who is anybody does, the country always bores me to death.
Ah, this is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just at present. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl. But I require tea.
Sugar.
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax. Thank you, Merriman.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar. And though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I have been trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest! My own Ernest!
Gwendolen, darling!
One moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to that young lady?
Did you, little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present around your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack!
Jack! Oh!
Here is Ernest.
My own love!
1 moment, Ernest. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to that young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolen!
Yes, to good heavens, works?
No, of course not. What could put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief! Oh! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked, but my name certainly is John. It's been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor, wounded Cecily! My sweet, wronged Gwendolyn! You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question that I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother, Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother, Ernest. So it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother, Ernest, is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life I have ever been reduced to such a painful position. However, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I never had a brother in my life, and I have certainly not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
And you never had a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No! Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
Oh!
Well, this ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful bunbury it is. The most wonderful bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, you have no right whatsoever to bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has a right to bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious bunburyist knows that.
Serious bunburyist? Good heavens.
One must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about bunburying. What on earth you are serious about? I haven't the remotest idea about everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to do, dear Algy, and a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off-colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
As far as your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say, your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Well, there's certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
No, if it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It's very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that.
How you can sit there calmly eating muffins when we were in this horrible trouble, I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly hot.
I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One must always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
No, I say it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. And at the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that's no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way.
I wish you would have tea cake instead. I don't like tea
Oh,
cake.
good heavens, I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
No, but you just said it was perfectly heartless eating muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algy! I wish to goodness you would go!
You can't possibly ask me to go without having dinner? It's absurd! I never go without having my dinner. No one ever does, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I naturally would take the name of Ernest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be christened Ernest. It'd be absurd. Besides, there's no evidence at all that I have ever been christened by anybody. It's entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened for years.
Yes! You have been christened. That is the important thing.
Oh, quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you have never been christened, I must say, I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you quite unwell. You can hardly have forgotten. Someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off in Paris this week by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary.
It used to be, I know. But I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
But that is nonsense. Algernon, you're always talking nonsense.
Jack, you read the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left. I told you I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Yes, but I hate tea cake.
Why on earth then do you allow tea cake to be served up to your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality!
Algernon! I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And there's still 1 muffin left.
Well,
they did not follow us at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough. They're looking at us.
What effrontery!
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing! I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject. But I intend to crush them. Their explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes! I mean, no!
principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage, of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling!
Darling!
Lady Bracknell! Gwendolyn, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing.
Come here, sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind in the young is a sign of mental decay. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father, as I'm glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong, but of course you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On that point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now as regards Algernon. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no, Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon.
Yeah.
No, I mean Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean he was found out. I mean doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. That is what I mean. So Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I'm glad, however, that he made up his mind at last on some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a curiously unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there is anything peculiar in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seems to me considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, Is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I'd no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, London, Jervis Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, Scotland.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence. Even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They're open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby and Markby. A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I'm told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
Oh, how extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
Ah, a life crowded with incident, I think. Though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young gal, I'm not myself in favour of premature experiences. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I suppose I better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune?
About £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
One moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000? And in the funds? Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady now that few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come over here, dear. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvellous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lancing, and after 3 months, her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Turn round, sweet child. No, the side view is what I want. Yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 weak points of our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. They're worn very high just at present. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care tuppence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon, but I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I'm not in favour of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage. Which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say, an ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew. But the fact is that I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon, impossible. He went to Oxford.
Well, I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire bottle of my Perrier Jouet Brut 89, a wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly well aware from the first that I have no brother, that I never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come over here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be very long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age till she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my knowledge, she has been 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40. Which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cicely should not be even more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algy, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively, but I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I am not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others. And waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she is 35, a remark which I'm bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature. I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage to Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I intend for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear. We've already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is not that somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he learned that that was the way in which you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand, then, there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
Well, I don't think that as things are now, it would be of much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I grieve to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savour of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views I've completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood seems peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I've just been informed by the pew opener for the last hour and a half. Miss Prism's been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I'm on my way to join her.
Allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be one of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect? Remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she occupies in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I heard of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
Oh, she approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting for you there for 1 hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism! Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel. A more than usually revolting sentimentality, but the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria! The Brighton Line!
A wild hope dawns across my life. I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I will wait for you all my life.
What do you you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. In families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered a thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
Sounds as if he was having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It's stopped now.
I wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
This suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends upon your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes. Here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Here is a stain on the lining caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. And here on the lock are my initials. I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it. Yes! Mother!
Mr. Worthing! I am unmarried!
Unmarried? That is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one that has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. Maternity has never been an incident in my life. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother. Then I have a brother after all! I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother, Cecily Gwendolyn. How can you have ever doubted that I have a brother? Algy, you young scoundrel, you'll have to treat me with more respect in the future. You've never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Not today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, however, though I was out of practice.
But what is your Christian name? Now that you have become someone else.
Oh, good heavens, I'd quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
Then the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened...
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father, General Moncrief.
Yes! But what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot, at the present moment, recall.
Aunt Augusta, this is a terrible crisis. Everything hangs on the nature of your reply.
Your poor dear mother always addressed him as General. Indeed, I don't think she would have dared to do otherwise.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
Oh, my dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
I've no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years, and that was the result of the Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and other things of that kind.
His name would appear in the army lists of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
The general was essentially a man of peace. except in his domestic life. But I'm quite sure his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Oh, generals, Mallam, Maxbohm, Magley. What ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief. Lieutenant 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, General 1869, Christian names. Earnest John. I always told you, Gwendolyn, my name was Ernest, didn't I? Well, it is Ernest after all. I mean, it naturally is Ernest.
Yes, I remember that the General was called Ernest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
My own Ernest. I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
My own darling. It is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
Gwendolyn!
Ernest!
Cecily!
Alfie!
Letitia!
Frederick!
My nephew? You seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
Well, on the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized, for the first time in my life, the vital importance of being earnest.
What a great performance, and I'm so glad you all got to see it. There are many more wonderful shows happening here at the Roundabout and on Broadway, and I encourage you all to support theater wherever you live and wherever you travel. I hope you enjoyed this wonderful night of Broadway at its best with Roundabout Theater Company's production of The Importance of Being Earnest. Thank you for coming. See you at the theater.